Good morning, grade 9. How are you all? Okay, so I welcome you to my new lesson from literature, which is The Return by Guji Wat Kyung O. It's a short story, and the story's essential question is what can we learn from a journey? I begin with the story itself, I would like you to just think of this question, develop an answer in your mind, and then you can just drop down your answer in the chat box for me to read later. Now, this story is about someone's journey. Okay, so the story has a character named Kamau. After 5 years as political prisoner, how will Kamau be welcomed back to his village? So the entire story revolves around this question. After 5 years, he has been into a prison. Now, if if we use our imagination, or if we just make an inference here, we would think that anyone who is returning back after 5 years to his home is going to be welcomed warmly, is going to be welcomed greatly by his people, by his family. So let's see how this goes with this character Kamal. Okay. Now, before I begin the story itself, reading the story, there is some background and there is the author's introduction. So let's begin with the background. The British colonial government controlled Kenya. In this background, we are looking at the time, the setting of the story. So it was they controlled Kenya, the British colonial government. The setting of this story from the late 19th century until 1963. In 1952, this government declared a state of emergency in order to violently suppress the Mau Mau rebellion, an anti-British uprising by the Gikuyu ethnic group. Now, an ethnic group is a traditional group of any place. And almost every place, every land has its own kind of ethnic group, which means the native people. Now here we are talking about the Mau Mau rebellion. Now this was a group by Gikuyu. This was a rebellion. This was a group of rebellions by Gikuyu ethnic group, and it was called Mau Mau. So basically, the problem or the war was between the Mau Mau group, the Mau Mau rebellion, and the British government or the British authorities. Over 20,000 Gikuyu were imprisoned by the government, and over 10,000 people lost their lives during the fighting. Now here is a little bit more about Mau Mau uprising. The Mau Mau uprising, also known as the Mau Mau rebellion, the Kenya emergency, and the Mau Mau revolt, was a war in the British Kenya colony between the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, also known as Mau Mau, and the British authorities. The period was between 1952 to 1960. The Gikuyu is the largest ethnic group in Kenya. They speak the Bantu Kikuyu language. At a population of 8.1 million as of 2019, they account for close to 17% of the total population of Kenya. The term Kikuyu is derived from the Swahili, from the form of the word Kikuyu. So this was a little bit more detail of Gikuyu and the Mau Mau rebellion. About the author, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, born in 1938, was born in Kenya, and as a young boy he lived through the Mau Mau rebellion. So he actually saw that period and that situation. His first play, The Black Hermit, was a major success. His unsparing but accurate account of life in the dictatorship of post-colonial Kenya, Petals of Blood landed him in prison in 1977. After his release, the government reissued a warrant for his arrest. Guji chose exile instead and fled to the United States. Guji had received numerous honors and taught a number of major universities. Now, these are some of the images from that time that I would like you to see how, at that time, British authorities controlled or suppressed the Mau Mau rebellion because they stood against them. They were tired of the British rule and hence wanted their land to be free of them. Here's another picture. Okay. So the author that we have today, Guji, is one who actually has lived through all this. He has seen this. He was imprisoned also. There's also another book on the same issue, Mau Mau Rebellion, The Emergency in Kenya from 1952 to 1956 by Nick Van Der Bijl. The vocab for this lesson is sprawling, serpentine, and compact. Now the first word, sprawling, is a verb. It means to stretch out or to walk awkwardly. Serpentine is an adjective which means anything that is curving, twisting like a snake or like a serpent. A serpent is a snake. Next is compact, which is an adjective. So anything that is compact is small or takes up a little space. Here's the story. The road was long. Whenever he took a step forward, little clouds of dust rose, whirled angrily behind him, and then slowly settled again. But a thin train of dust was left in the air, moving like smoke. He walked on, however, unmindful of the dust and ground under his feet. Yet with every step, he seemed more and more conscious of the hardness and apparent animosity of the road. Not that he looked down. On the contrary, he looked straight ahead, as if he would any time now see a familiar object that would hail him as a friend and tell him that he was near home. But the road stretched on. He made quick springing steps, his left hand dangling freely by the side of his once white coat, now torn and worn out. His right hand, bent at the elbow, held onto a string tied to a small bundle on his slightly drooping back. The bundle, well wrapped with cotton cloth that had once been printed with red flowers, now faded out, swung from side to side in the harmony with the rhythm of his steps. The bundle held the bitterness and the hardships of the years spent in detention camps. Now and then he looked at the sun on its homeward journey. Sometimes he darted quick side glances at the small hedged strips of land which with their sickly looking crops, maize, beans, and peas, appeared much as everything else did, unfriendly. The whole country was dull and seemed weary. To Kamau, this was nothing new. He remembered that even before the Mau Mau emergency, the over-tilled Gikuyu holdings wore haggard looks in contrast to the sprawling green fields in the settled area. These two paragraphs actually describe his journey back home, and the words that are used here create a very clear picture of how the whole scene was as he walked back home after 5 years being imprisoned. So he was quite eager. He wanted somebody to just look at him and wave him and welcome him. He was waiting and he was longing to get back home, and he felt that the more he waited, the more he longed, the more the distance became longer and farther. A path branched to the left. He hesitated for a moment and then made up his mind. For the first time, his eyes brightened a little as he went along the path that would take him down the valley and then to the village. At last, home was near, and with that realization, the faraway look of a weary traveler seemed to desert him for a while. The valley and the vegetation along it were in deep contrast to the surrounding country. For here green bush and trees thrived. This could only mean one thing. Hanya River still flowed. He quickened his steps as if he could scarcely believe this to be true till he had actually set his eyes on the river. It was there. It still flowed. Hania, where so often he had taken a bath, plunging stark naked into its cool living water, warmed his heart as he watched its serpentine movement around the rocks and heard its light murmurs. A painful exhilaration passed all over him, and for a moment he longed for those days. He sighed. Perhaps the river would not recognize in his hardened features that same boy to whom the riverside world had meant everything. Yet as he approached Honia, he felt more active to it than he had felt to anything else since his release. After a group of women, sorry, a group of women were drawing water. He was excited, for he could recognize one or two from his ridge. There was the middle-aged Wanjiku, whose deaf son had been killed by the security forces just before he himself was arrested. She had always been a darling of the village, having a smile for everyone and food for all. Would they receive him? Would they give him a hero's welcome? He thought so. Had he not always been a favorite all along the ridge? And had he not fought for the land? He wanted to run and shout, "Here I am! I have come back to you!" But he desisted. He was a man. "Is it well with you?" A furious voices responded. The other women, with tired and worn features, looked at him mutely as if his greeting was of no consequence. So Kamau, when he asked her, "Is it well with you?" they were kind of silent. Why? Had he been so long in the camp? His spirits were damped as he feebly asked, "Do you not remember me?" Again they looked at him. They stared at him with cold, hard looks, like everything else. They seemed to be deliberately refusing to know or own him. It was Wanjiku who at last recognized him, but there was neither warmth nor enthusiasm in her voice as she said, "Oh, is it you, Kamau? We thought you—" She didn't continue. Only now he noticed something else. Surprise? Fear? He could not tell. He saw their quick glances dart at him, and he knew for certain that a secret from which he was excluded bound them together. Perhaps I'm no longer one of them, he bitterly reflected. But they told him of the new village. The old village of scattered huts spread thinly over the ridge was no more. He left them feeling embittered and cheated. The old village had not even waited for him. And suddenly he felt a strong nostalgia for his old home, friends, and surroundings. He thought of his father, mother, and he dared not think about her. But for all that, Muthoni, just as she had been in the old days, came back to his mind. His heart beat faster. He felt desire and a warmth thrilled through him. He quickened his steps. He forgot the village woman as he remembered his wife. He had stayed with her for a mere 2 weeks. Then he had been swept away by the colonial forces, like many others. He had been hurriedly screened and then taken to detention without trial. And all that time he had thought of nothing but the village and his beautiful woman. The others had been like him. They had talked of nothing but their homes. One day he was working next to another detainee from Moranga Moronga is a town in Kenya. Suddenly, the detainee, George, stopped breaking stones. He sighed heavily. His worn-out eyes had a faraway look. What's wrong, man? What's the matter with you? Kamal asked him. It's my wife. I left her expecting a baby. I've no idea what has happened to her. Another detainee put in. For me, I left my woman with a baby. She had just been delivered. We were all happy, but on the same day I was arrested. And so they went on. All of them longed for one day, the day of their return home. Then life would begin anew. Kamau himself had left his wife without a child. He had not even finished paying the bride price. But now he would go seek work in Nairobi and pay off the remainder to Muthoni's parents. Life would indeed begin anew. They would have a son and bring him up in their own home. Now here, Kamau is actually dreaming of his future. He's imagining him with a baby, with his baby boy, and living a happy life. So all his dreams are before him while he walks towards his home. With these prospects before his eyes, he quickened his steps. He wanted to run. No, fly to hasten his return. He was now nearing the top of the hill. He wished he could suddenly meet his brothers and sisters. Would they ask him questions? He would at any rate not tell them all. The beating, the screaming, and the work on roads inquiries with an askari. Askari is a military soldier, always nearby, ready to kick him if he relaxed. Yes, he had suffered many humiliations, and he had not resisted. Was there any need? But his soul and all the vigor of his manhood had rebelled and bled with rage and bitterness. One day these Wazungu would go. They are the people of the European descent, and if we talk specifically, if I be specific, they were British people. On one day his people would be free. Then he did not know what he would do. However, he bitterly assured himself no one would ever flout his manhood again. He mounted the hill and then stopped. The whole plain lay below. The new village was before him. Rows and rows of compact mud huts crouching on the plain under the fast vanishing sun. Dark blue smoke curled upward from various huts to form a dark mist that hovered over the village. Beyond, the deep blood red, sinking sun sent out finger like streaks of light that thinned outward and mingled with the grey mist shrouding the distant hills. In the village, he moved from street to street, meeting new faces. He inquired. He found his home. He stopped at the entrance to the yard and breathed hard and full. This was the moment of his return home. His father sat huddled up on a three-legged stool. He was now very aged, and Kamau pitied the old man. But he had been spared, yes, spared to see his son's return. Father, the old man did not answer. He just looked at Kamau with strange, vacant eyes. Kamau was impatient. He felt annoyed and irritated. Did he not see him? Would he behave like the woman Kamau had met by the river? In the street, naked and half-naked children were playing, throwing dust at one another. The sun had already set, and it looked as if there would be moonlight. Father, do you remember me? He felt tired. Then he saw his father suddenly start and tremble like a leaf. He saw him stare with unbelieving eyes. Fear was discernible in those eyes. His mother came, and his brothers too. They crowded around him. His aged mother clung to him and sobbed hard. I knew my son would come. I knew he was not dead. Why? Who told you I was dead? That Karanja, son of Jube. And then Kamau understood. He understood his trembling father. He understood the woman at the river. But one thing puzzled him. He had never been in the same detention camp with Karanja. So here, actually, the thing is that this character Karanja gave his family a wrong message, a false message, telling them that their son was dead, and that might be the reason that they acted so strangely when they actually saw him right before them. Anyway, he had come back. He wanted now to see Muthoni. Why had she not come out? He wanted to shout, "I've come, Muthoni, I'm here." He looked around. His mother understood him. She quickly darted a glance at her mat and then simply said, Muthoni went away. Kamau felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked at the village huts and the dullness of the land. He wanted to ask many questions, but he dared not. He could not yet believe that Muthoni had gone, but he knew by the look of the woman at the river, by the look of his parents, that she was gone. "She was a good daughter to us," his mother was explaining. "She waited for you, and patiently bore all the ills of the land. When Karanja came and said that you were dead, your father believed him. She believed him too, and keened means she mourned for you for a month. Karanja constantly paid us visits. He was of your Rika, the people of your age. So Rika is a group of Kikuyu children that are of the same age. He was of your Rika, you know. Then she got a child. We could have kept her, but where is the land? Where is the food? Ever since land consolidation, our last security was taken away. We let Karanja go with her. Other women have done worse, gone to town. Only the infant and the old have been left here." He was not listening. The coldness in his stomach slowly changed to bitterness. He felt bitter against all the people, including his father and mother. He felt like they all betrayed him. Why did they let him? Why did they let her go? They had betrayed him. They had laughed. They had leagued against him. And Karanja had always been his rival. 5 years was admittedly not a short time, but why did she go? Why did they allow her to go? He wanted to speak. Yes, speak and denounce everything. The woman by the river, the village, the people who dwelled there. But he could not. This bitter thing was choking him. You gave my own away, he whispered. Listen, child. The big yellow moon dominated the horizon. He hurried away, bitter and blind, and now only stopped when he came to her Honya River. And only stopped when he came to the Honya River. And standing at the bank, he saw not the river, but his hopes dashed on the ground instead. The river moved swiftly, making ceaseless, monotonous murmurs. In the forest, the crickets and other insects kept up an incessant buzz, and above, the moon shone bright. He tried to remove his coat, and the small bundle he had held onto so firmly fell. It rolled down the bank, and before Kamau knew what was happening, it was floating swiftly down the river. For a long time he was shocked and wanted to retrieve it. What would he show? His Oh, he had forgotten so soon. His wife had gone, and the little things that had so strangely reminded him of her, and that he had guarded all those years, had gone. He did not know why, but somehow he felt relieved. Thoughts of drowning himself dispersed. He began to put on his coat, murmuring to himself, "Why should she have waited for me? Why should all the changes have waited for my return?" Now the ending is really sad, as he lost his wife. He lost all those 5 years, and he lost all the possessions he had in that bag. Now I want you to reread the whole lesson, the whole story, and if you find something that's difficult to be understood, please mark them down. I can answer them to you in my next session. And for now, if you have any questions, you can drop them down in the chat box. In the next session, hopefully, we will do the worksheet related to this lesson. What are your views about the story? What do you think? Your opinions? I would definitely like to know them. I would definitely like to know your opinions, your views. But since we don't have much time to do that here, so I would wait until you send me your remarks on the story in our next session in the chat box. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you. We'll see you in the next session. And have a good day. Bye. आफा वफा मुझे पता नहीं अभी